about their research topic and then move right into this project. So I'll let them take it from here, but thank you all for coming.
So our project's about freedom of expression. I'm Dana.
And I'm Kelsey.
And we...
You want the lights now?
Helpful, yes.
Okay.
Please, thank you. And we both focused on two different expressive topics throughout the semester, mine being freedom of speech.
And I'm with Freedom of Art.
And so that kind of led our master plan.
We started off with looking into commonalities that happen within Rwanda. One of the main things is agriculture there. And within their agriculture, there are these swift tracks that run along the hillside since it's very hilly, and there's all these rolling hills. We also found their politics, they're very strict. Paul Kagame is the current president. There's been some protesting lately against him, and there's been a lot of arguments going on within Rwanda, and there's kind of important people that are dying just for speaking up for freedom and wanting this freedom of speech. I looked into the Inagango art, which is a cultural art within Rwanda. It's they use mostly reds, blacks, and whites.
Here's an example.
And yellow. And we have an example of it. It's actually made out of cow dung that is pinched up on a wooden board and then painted afterwards.
She mentions cow dung right when you touch it.
So what we wanted to do was provide an outlet for expression that is more peaceful, other than killing each other and making your word heard. So our master plan had a main focal point as well as program space within it, so that it's not always being used for one central event. We also customized living space for the expression of art, as well as utilize some sustainability. We looked at the Greek theater since it works with hills and nature, and it creates this focal point in the middle for a stage area. We also looked within stadiums because it's a popular use in Rwanda for mass meetings, and the president addresses the masses quite often in a soccer field or football field. So our development was to create a very large space for speaking, as well as these individual programmed areas. And we wanted to concentrate a lot of our design on the view, since we wanted people to be able to see from the rooftops, see down the alleyways, make it known that there is a large meeting space going on in here, as well as within the individualized terraces. And we have raked seating in the middle to allow for this linearity towards the stage. Now I compared this to different sites, such as First Niagara Pavilion and the Blossom Music Center, to kind of give you an idea of scale. It's around the same area being utilized, since if you cut off the edges and just move it backwards. So it is generally a good amount of space to have this focal point and still utilize view. From our last section of this project, we looked into living spaces. I created a climbable facade so that people could actually climb and create graffiti on it. That way there is this view towards the center, as well as communicating with the center. And my partner made what? Oh, I feel like I'm talking so much. And my partner made a living space, which it's like a building within inside of the building, where the community can actually walk through the studio space, as well as the residents having their own studio space. And I got to hit myself. But as you can see here, there's blocks that you can climb on and climb up and actually have graffiti on so that people can express themselves through graffiti. These are the program spaces. We worked a lot with expression gardens, expression walls, viewing platforms, and climbing blocks. The expression walls, I was kind of thinking that it's kind of an abstract way that if you look at it at a certain view, that you can see what it's saying, especially focused on the center stage space. And if you look away from it, it kind of becomes a different picture. But I really wanted it to communicate with the stage, as in, say Paul Kagame was making a speech down there, maybe it says, "Yay, Paul Kagame, thank you for coming," on it, or it can mean something else. The expression garden, it communicates a lot with the residents, where they have their own agricultural space that they can walk outside of their building, plant things. But it's kind of tucked into the building area, and then as it moves out, it becomes this expression garden where you can actually walk through more, since there's going to be a lot of foot traffic through it, so that way you're not tromping all over the garden. But you can express yourself and put your own artwork out there so that people can see it. Oh, it's not fun. And then we worked with sustainability. We wanted to create a way to utilize the water runoff. So we looked into the cisterns where they will collect this water runoff, as well as keep it within that area so that it's not rolling down the hill and washing away the hill. So the water that is collected will go through the toilets and other non-potable systems so that it can be utilized there, and once it goes through that, it will then go into the biogas tank, where it is collected with waste, agricultural waste, in this gray water, and then can be utilized for fertilizer, which is the slurry that is collected at the bottom, as well as the biogas that is collected at the top for cooking, since that's also a large problem within Rwanda, is that deforestation and too much smoke within the houses from all the fire burning. And then I also created this seating system to work within the rake seating area, where the seats are foldable and can be tucked away into the side of the terraces so that they can be taken out and utilized there and moved around. But when it's not being used for maybe a concert or an art show or a speaker, they can be tucked back into the storage area.
So all of this led to our two big topics, creating our most important spaces. And originally we thought of an art school and like a public forum or a speaking space. So when we put them together, we thought the most important spot for them would be at the focal point, kind of the center, the facing area, the view lines of our site. So it's this lowest building here, and you can see it's massing on our model as well. And as we started to think about it, there was really big issues of transparency versus anonymity in the buildings, meaning that people who want to express themselves either through art or through speech need to not only be transparent in the sense that they need to be seen and these things need to say what they need to say, but there also needs to be anonymity in Rwanda, especially because they need to protect the rights and the safety of the people who are making these statements and using these spaces. So for our transparency, I'm sorry, as I said before, it's really important to be encouraging these people, and if you see one person or you can see what they've done, it encourages another person. It's also important for the space to stand out from everything else in the area because it really is so different than what's previously done in Rwanda. They're a very quiet country, and that's a big part of why we wanted to encourage this freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And of course, anonymity is all about the safety. So encryption was a big thing that we looked into. Encrypted internet and computer use, the ability to either be sitting in this space on your Facebook or sitting in this space leaking Rwandan government papers. Whatever you're doing, you should be able to tell the difference. And it was also kind of important to make sure that communication between the types of spaces, i.e. the art school and the forum spaces, was really strong because they are so hand in hand as expressive modes. And that brings me to duality, which is our building is dual purpose, as I've mentioned. And so we've called it this expression, but there's, communication and expression are these big crossing, overlapping things that we've talked about, but there also needs to be a strong difference between the art spaces and the communication spaces because you need to be able to read both of them in the building. And so we've done that by the pushing and pulling of spaces, the facade of the spaces, as well as how each space is defined within the building. So art spaces have this metal industrial graffiti kind of feel to them so that people really feel like this is a space that they can adjust and change and work on. And they're also more closed in because they are classroom functions. And then the forum spaces are much more adjustable kind of pathways with spots to stop and nodes to discuss while still having kind of like a flow that goes through the entirety of the building. And so as I said, the art school really needs to be about this kind of mischief and grandeur that there is to particularly graffiti because it's a highly expressive form of art that we've studied a lot. We've discussed in previous juries how graffiti is not quite as fun if you're allowed to do it. There has to be sort of a ideal of maybe I shouldn't do this, so that's why we really want it to be all over the buildings. And then for the public forum, there needs to be a lot more encouragement because the community is so quiet. And so we really didn't want to make anybody feel locked in or like they had to be in a certain place. And so we wanted to make sure that they were able to kind of define their own spaces. And so basically what that brings me to is that it's a formula for growth. We want this to be something that if we design it now, it goes on in the future to be usable in any country or in other parts of Rwanda. And it really just encourages people to be heard because Rwanda's society isn't saying what needs to be said. There's laws against types of public speech. There's laws against talking about the history of the genocide. There's permits needed to turn left on the wrong day. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but so we really want them to feel safe and capable to say what they need to say in these spaces.
Great, so you talked about a lot of the